I never thought a single random message on my boyfriend's phone would shatter my life and, at the same time, hand me a new one. But sometimes, betrayal becomes the best thing that ever happens to you. Dear viewers, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Enjoy listening. Jason's apartment had long felt like a second home. I knew where he stashed his fancy Colombian coffee, which drawer held his favorite Batman socks, and how the sunlight at 3 p.m. cast perfect glows on his leather couch. I stood barefoot in his kitchen, wearing one of his shirts, waiting for him to finish showering, when his iPhone buzzed on the marble countertop. At first, I didn't even glance at it. Then I saw the name on the screen, Madison, his ex, the red-haired Instagram model with perfect lips and a figure he casually mentioned in our conversations. My heart froze before my hand reached for the phone. I told myself I wouldn't read it, but I did, and I regret it. Or maybe it was necessary. Madison: "You still with that Olivia girl?" Jason: "Yeah, for now. But honestly, Mad, she's so predictable. Sweet, sure, but sometimes it feels like I'm dating a 1950s librarian. Being with her is like wearing comfortable but boring shoes." Madison: "Lowell, for real? I thought you were happy." Jason: "She's a good girl. But where's the passion? The fire? It was different with you. Remember that night in Miami?" I didn't read further. Not because I couldn't, but because I realized I didn't need to see more of the person I loved, turning our relationship into a dull comparison with his ex's memories. The worst part wasn't the cruel things he said. The worst was the casualness of the betrayal. He discussed me like you'd discuss the weather, emotionless, disrespectful, just stating facts about how boring I was. I didn't wait for him to come out of the bathroom. No need for explanations or half-truths. I gathered my things, straightened my spine, and headed for the door with a numb heart. As I turned the handle, he called from the bathroom, "Babe, you leaving?" I paused, not turning back, and said loud enough for him to hear through the door, "You'll miss this predictable girl the moment someone else finds me thrilling." The elevator ride down felt surreal. I could still feel the weight of his words on my chest, like someone had draped a wet blanket over me that I hadn't noticed until it started suffocating me. I kept hearing him call me predictable. Not to my face, of course, but in a whisper to someone he once loved. That kind of betrayal doesn't scream. It's quiet, surgically precise, and cuts deeper than any yell. Outside, the city hummed like nothing had happened. People passed me with iced coffees and shopping bags, chatting on phones, laughing. I felt invisible. Funny, isn't it? You pour yourself into someone, invest time, care, attachment, and suddenly you're just a forgettable memory. I didn't cry. I wasn't there yet. I was still processing something colder than tears. By the time I got home, I decided he no longer deserved access to me. Not my time, my kindness, or even my pain. I blocked his number before he could try to explain or talk me into staying, and while part of me wanted to scream, another part, quieter, more dangerous, was already thinking about something else entirely. Not just moving on, but how and with whom. Strange how clarity comes in moments like that, not with thunder or lightning, but with silence. I sat on my couch that evening, tracing the rim of a wine glass, thinking about every conversation we'd had. Every time I dimmed my own spark just to make him feel brighter. Every little moment I thought was love, but was really me shrinking to fit his comfort zone. Looking back, I could see it. How he rolled his eyes when I told a story he didn't find interesting. How he tuned out when I talked about my students or books. He didn't want a partner. He wanted a mirror. Someone who'd reflect only the parts of him he liked. And when I didn't show what his ego demanded, he decided I was boring. That word spun in my head like a bad song until it lost its sting and became fuel. I didn't want revenge in the traditional sense. I didn't want to scream, throw things, or beg him to see my worth. No, that's not me. But I did want him to feel something he never imagined. Regret. The kind that twists in your gut when you see someone shining without you. I just didn't know yet that life had already handed me the perfect opportunity. It would come in the form of a smile, a voice, a familiar pair of eyes belonging to someone else. It was only a few days later, not enough time to fully process the betrayal, when I saw him. Ryan, Jason's younger brother. I hadn't expected to run into him. I walked into a quiet little coffee shop near work, just trying to feel normal again, and there he was in line, ordering something way too complicated for a Monday. When he turned and saw me, his face lit up with that easy, boyish grin, and for the first time in days, I smiled without forcing it. He came over with his iced latte and a crooked smirk. "So, I heard about you and Jason," he said softly, testing the waters. I nodded, half amused. "Your brother wanted someone more exciting," I replied, sipping my coffee. "So I'm thinking, why not become exciting?" There was a pause. Not awkward, just charged. Ryan tilted his head, eyes narrowing playfully. "Dangerous words," he said. "You know I'm a fan of danger." And just like that, the mood shifted. We exchanged numbers under the guise of keeping in touch. But we both knew. I didn't hide the spark in my voice, and he didn't hide the interest in his eyes. It started innocently. A few texts, a meme here, a "what's up" there. But beneath the banter was something surgically precise, intentional. I wasn't just texting Ryan. I was lighting a fuse, one spark at a time, and I knew exactly where it would lead. Ryan wasn't like Jason. He didn't talk over me or make me feel like I had to entertain him to keep his attention. Our conversations flowed from silly jokes to surprisingly thoughtful takes on life. He asked questions and actually listened. He didn't flinch when I got quiet. He didn't rush to fill the silence. And when I told him Jason called me too serious, he just looked at me and said, "That's not a flaw. That's depth." Still, I wasn't naive. I knew exactly what I was doing and how it might look. People talk, mutual friends notice, screenshots get passed around. I wasn't hiding, but I wasn't advertising either. The gossip wasn't the point. What mattered was what it did to Jason's tidy little world. I imagined him seeing my name on Ryan's phone screen, imagined his ego taking hit after hit, and I didn't feel sorry, not one bit, because for the first time, I wasn't trying to be the good girl. I wasn't begging to be understood or molding myself to someone else's expectations. I was just being spontaneous, bold, unapologetic, everything he said I wasn't. And the more time I spent talking to Ryan, the more I realized I'd been starving for that kind of attention, the kind that doesn't ask you to shrink, the kind that lets you breathe. The whispers started pretty quickly. Someone saw us at dinner. Another caught us laughing outside a bookstore. And while no one had photos yet, the stories spread on their own. I didn't post anything obvious, but I did share a blurry photo of 2 drinks, a hoodie that wasn't mine draped over a chair. Subtle but sharp enough for those paying attention, especially Jason, to connect the dots. And of course, he noticed. Naturally, a text came one night. "You're dating my brother? That's low." I stared at the screen for a moment, letting the irony sink in. He had the nerve to call me low after comparing me to his ex like I was a used chapter in a story he'd already finished. I took a breath, then typed without hesitation, "Says the guy who trashed me in text to his ex." I didn't wait for a reply. There was a strange peace in it, like I'd finally broken a cycle, not just with him, but with every version of myself that ever begged to be chosen. I wasn't the girl standing in his kitchen reading those texts anymore. That girl was quiet, careful, heartbroken. But this woman was playing a different game now, and Jason was only starting to realize he wasn't the one holding the pieces. The first time Ryan and I went out somewhere, it was innocent. Coffee, then dinner, then drinks that lasted longer than either of us planned. It all felt easy, unforced, not heavy with expectations. He opened doors, laughed at my sarcasm, and actually remembered things I'd said a week ago. The conversation was smooth, full of that kind of attention you don't realize you've missed until someone offers it freely. But here's where things started to shift, not just between me and Ryan, but in the world around us. We went to a small Italian restaurant one night, the same one Jason used to take me to on Friday evenings. Same candlelit table by the window, same waiter. I knew what I was doing, and Ryan did too. He didn't say it, but he knew this was personal. I wasn't just rewriting my story. I was writing it right over the ashes of the old one. And the thing is, I didn't need to say much online. One photo, 2 wine glasses, one with red lipstick, a slow pan of a dinner plate with a man's laugh in the background. It was artful, intentional. The internet didn't need full context. People love filling in the blanks, especially mutual friends, especially those with group chats. It didn't take long before I got the first message letting me know Jason had seen it. The message came late at night, short, bitter, laced with wounded pride. "You're really stooping this low?" I looked at it for a moment, my heart steady. No apologies, no owning up, just blame shifting. I could picture him pacing that apartment, phone in hand, jaw tight with that anger that only comes when control slips through your fingers. I didn't respond right away. I wanted him to sit in it, let it burn. When I did reply, it wasn't dramatic, just the truth. Says the guy who trashed me in texts to his ex. I didn't need to yell to be heard. Not anymore. The words hit harder that way, clear and sharp, and deep down I knew it wasn't just about Ryan. It was about me shining publicly, quietly, without him. That's what stung him most, seeing me become a version of myself he never bothered to notice. Ryan, he didn't push. He never asked about Jason or fished for details. He just kept showing up with random texts, movie nights, gentle teasing that made me laugh in a way I hadn't in a long time. And slowly, the line between revenge and something real started to blur. I caught myself noticing how he looked at me when I wasn't talking, how he leaned in like my thoughts were worth hearing. And that's when things got complicated. One night after dinner, we sat in his car outside my place. The windows were slightly fogged from the warmth. Music soft, some indie playlist humming in the background. I felt the pause, the kind that hangs between two people when something's shifting, but neither wants to be the first to admit it. Ryan turned to me and said, "You're not doing this just to mess with him, right?" And I froze for a second. It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself more than once. I could have brushed it off, made it a joke, but instead I looked him in the eyes and told the truth. It started that way, but now I don't know. You're different. He didn't push. He just nodded, like he understood not everything starts for the right reasons, but sometimes it ends up right anyway. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was something else, something unfolding, but I could feel a storm brewing, not just with Jason, but inside me. I wasn't sure what version of myself I was becoming, a wounded woman seeking justice, or one learning to love herself through someone else's kindness. Either way, it wasn't just about revenge anymore, not quite. And I had a feeling when Jason showed up next, things wouldn't be subtle. He didn't knock, just showed up. The sound of his voice calling my name through the front door made my heart drop, not from longing, but from sheer disbelief. I opened it slowly, not out of fear, but control. Jason stood there, jaw tight, eyes wild like he hadn't slept. He didn't look like the man who rolled his eyes at my book recommendations or tuned out when I talked about my day. He looked unraveling. "You're seriously dating my brother?" he asked, voice raised, but his hands shook like he didn't know what to do with them. I didn't flinch. "I'm not sure what upsets you more, that I left or that I didn't fall apart after you." His mouth opened like he had something to say, but I didn't give him room to find the words. He didn't come for honesty. He came because he lost control of the narrative. He stepped inside, pacing like he still owned the room, like he still had that kind of access. "You're doing this just to get back at me?" he snapped. I watched him, really watched him for the first time without the filter of love or hope or memory. "No," I said calmly. "I'm doing this because your brother actually sees me. He listens. He laughs with me. He respects me. Things you never did. Not really." And the silence after that, it was glorious. Jason stood there like a man who just realized the door he always assumed would stay open was now locked. He ran a hand through his hair, eyes darting like he was searching for the version of me that would cry, forgive, bend. But that version didn't live here anymore. "Olivia, come on," he said finally, voice softening, desperation dressed as sincerity. "We were good together. You know that." I almost laughed, not from humor but exhaustion. "We were convenient," I corrected. "You liked having someone who kept your world tidy, who made you feel admired. But when it got too real, too deep, you called it boring." His face tightened. "I didn't mean—" he started, but I raised a hand. "You meant every word. You just didn't think I'd ever find out, or worse, that I'd actually leave." He stepped closer now, slower, like someone approaching a glass figurine he'd once dropped and suddenly wanted to piece back together. "Maybe I made a mistake," he said, and for the first time I saw it. Not just regret, but panic. The kind of panic that comes when a man realizes the woman he discarded has moved on, not with bitterness but better, and not alone. "You don't get to do this," I said softly, but with weight behind every syllable. "You don't get to discard me and then be surprised when someone else sees the value you ignored." He didn't answer. He just stood there, caught between shame and disbelief, like he couldn't fully process that I hadn't just left. I was thriving without him. "I want another chance," he whispered finally. "I know I messed up, but I miss you." That's when something in me settled, not romantically, not even triumphantly, just clarity. Because there was a time those words would have broken me, made me weak, but now they sounded small, too little, too late, like a song I used to love but didn't hit anymore. I looked at him, not with anger, not even with hurt, just with truth. "You discarded me because I wasn't exciting enough. Now you're the one standing here, watching from the sidelines as I shine." I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell. I just stepped back and closed it. And that sound, that soft click, wasn't a goodbye. It was a closing. With Ryan, things felt different. Not louder, not flashier, just realer. He didn't try to impress me. He didn't overpromise or overplay. He just was. And in the quiet ways he showed up, a text to check in, a playlist sent at midnight, remembering how I take my tea, I started to feel something I hadn't planned on. Safety. I didn't realize how long I'd been holding my breath until I started exhaling around him, but I kept my guard up. Even as days passed and the connection deepened, I couldn't help it. There was always that voice in the back of my mind. Is this real, or is this just an echo of revenge? One night, curled up on his couch with a bowl of popcorn between us and some movie neither of us was really watching, Ryan turned to me and asked the question I'd been dodging even in my own head. Is this about me or him? His voice wasn't accusing. It was honest. And it shook me because I didn't want to hurt Ryan. Not him, not this. But I couldn't lie. So I looked at him steady and gave the only truth I had. It started with revenge, but you might be the twist I didn't see coming. Ryan didn't say anything right away. He just looked at me, his eyes searching mine like he was weighing something he wasn't sure he had words for. Then he gave the slightest nod, almost like a quiet, "Okay." That silence meant everything. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't approval, it was understanding. And somehow that hit deeper than any grand gesture. In the days that followed, I found myself laughing more genuinely. Not the kind of laugh that has to prove something or mask discomfort. Just simple, easy joy. With Ryan, there was no pressure to be exciting enough or charming on command. I could be tired. I could ramble about nonsense. I could just exist without editing myself. And every time he reached for my hand or brushed hair from my face, it felt like something solid being built. Brick by honest brick. But even then, there were moments I caught myself wondering, do I deserve this? After all, this didn't start with a pure heart. It started with bruises, fire, and a need to be seen. Can something born from the aftermath of betrayal grow into something lasting? Or was I just living on borrowed time? I didn't know, but part of me was finally ready to find out. The final twist came at a friend's party, one of those casual backyard gatherings where everyone brings something and someone inevitably forgets the ice. Ryan and I showed up together, hand in hand. Nothing dramatic, no grand entrance, but the moment Jason saw us across the yard, something in him shifted. I caught it in his eyes. Not anger this time, not even jealousy, just emptiness. A hollow realization that he'd lost something he never thought he could. We didn't make a show of it. We didn't need to. I was laughing at something, Ryan whispering in my ear, and Jason watched from the other side of the lawn, beer in hand, shoulders slightly slumped. He looked smaller, dimmer, like the sharp edges he used to carry had rusted, and I realized, without pride or spite, that the man who once called me boring had become the least interesting person in the room. But that wasn't enough. I needed closure, real closure. I excused myself from Ryan and walked over to Jason. He was standing by the fence, alone, staring at his phone like he was pretending to be busy. "Hey," I said simply. He looked up, and for a second, I saw the guy I fell for, vulnerable, lost. But the moment passed quickly. Olivia. His voice was cautious, almost scared. You look happy." "I am happy," I replied, and it was true. "For the first time in a long time." He nodded, looking down at his hands. "I was a fool," he whispered. "When I said those things to Madison, I don't know what got into me. You were the best thing that ever happened to me." I could see the sincerity in his eyes, real regret. A year ago, those words would have melted me, pulled me back to him. But now they just bounced off. "Jason," I said gently, "the problem wasn't that you said those things. The problem was that you thought them for a long time." And I felt it. His face twisted. "But we could try again. I've changed." "Maybe you have," I agreed. "But so have I. And the version of me that could have forgiven you, she doesn't exist anymore." I saw something break in his eyes. The final understanding that some things can't be fixed, some bridges can't be rebuilt. "I wish you the best, Jason. Really. But my story isn't about you anymore." I turned and walked back to Ryan, leaving Jason standing alone by the fence. And for the first time since the day I read those texts, I felt completely free. "How'd it go?" Ryan asked when I returned to him. "Good," I said, taking his hand. "It's done, finally." He squeezed my hand. "What now?" I looked at him. This man who saw me at my darkest and helped me find light, who didn't ask me to be anyone else but let me be me. "Now," I said, "we write our own story, from the start." He grinned, that crooked smile that made me fall for him. I liked the sound of that. And as we left that party, hand in hand, I realized revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's about rebuilding yourself, your worth, your right to happiness. Jason wanted thrills and chaos. He didn't get that peace. Real peace shines brighter than any drama. And the truth is, I didn't need to prove him wrong. I just needed to become someone who didn't care if he was ever right. 3 months later, I got a text from Madison. Apparently, Jason had tried to get her back, but she wasn't having it. "He keeps talking about some girl named Olivia," she wrote. "Says he made the biggest mistake of his life, but I'm not into someone else's leftovers." I showed the text to Ryan and we both laughed. Not maliciously, just freely. "Think he'll ever get it?" Ryan asked. "Get what?" "That the biggest revenge is not caring about revenge at all." I kissed him, feeling the last pieces of old pain dissolve into new happiness. "Maybe," I said, "but that's not our problem anymore." And it was true. My story wasn't about Jason betraying me anymore. It was about how I learned to betray the version of myself that settled for less than I deserved, about how I found a man who saw me not as a project to fix, but as a finished work of art. Revenge, it turns out, isn't always bitter. Sometimes it's sweet, like the kiss of someone who loves you for you. And sometimes the best revenge is just living well, loving boldly, and never looking back. In the end, Jason was right about one thing. I was predictable. Predictably, I chose happiness over bitterness, love over revenge, and the future over the past. And if that made me boring in his eyes, so be it. Because in the eyes of the man who truly loved me, I was everything I needed to be. Dear viewers, if you enjoyed the story, give it a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you won't miss new exciting stories. See you tomorrow.